everybody. Welcome to the Bituation Room on a Tuesday, our originally scheduled show. What a show it is. I am so excited for my guests. Anat Shenker-Osorio, who is a messaging guru, is going to be here, going to explain how and why Democrats fail and progressive messaging doesn't fail, never given a chance. So I'm really excited to have her on the show. And I hope that you all, if you're not familiar with her, become her fans, because I am. As well as comedian Anthony Atamanuik is back on the show. I'm super excited. We're going to get into Social Security. What is it? Who need? Why? We're also going to talk about no other nation winning, or no other land, winning the Oscar for Best Documentary, which is a massive breakthrough in Hollywood, and talk a little bit about what is going on over in Gaza and in the West Bank. We are also going to, be bitching about all the things and reading your comments and all of that. So if you didn't know, this is the Bituation Room, and I am your host, Francesca Fiorentini, and I would so appreciate a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Go ahead, give it 5 stars. Also, if you're listening live, like and share the stream. It helps people discover us. And, do all the things, click all the buttons. And also, few announcements up top. If you are going to be in the Sacramento area on Sunday, March 16th, come see me and Matt Lieb doing our co-headlining show at the Punchline. It'll be so great. And then we will be on May 7th, which is a Wednesday, at Cobb's Comedy in San Francisco. Bring your family, bring your friends, bring your cousins, bring everybody. We want to pack it out with nothing but the best folks. So really excited to be back in the Bay for that. And then, of course, as always, New World Disorder is my monthly show in Pasadena. So come out if you're in the LA area. And I know these are all California locations, and I promise you there will be other locations except also California. Anyway, the point is there's going to be more, and there's going to be live Bituation Rooms throughout the year. It feels like the year just got started. It's somehow March. Oh my effing God. So stay tuned for all of that. And also, this is obviously a third of the show, right? We got 2 other shows that happened during the week. And they include the bonus episode. And you're like, what? A bonus episode? Yes. Every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, we do a bonus show. Try to do fun stories, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes everything's bad because everything's bad. We're really in the middle of the Schitt's Creek moment. So if you want to get access to all those episodes and support the show more broadly with your hard-earned dollars that do not go to one lick of waste over here, patreon.com/Bituation Room is where you go to do that. So many different perks, 20% off of merch at bituationroom.com. You get access to our monthly, or not monthly, but our AMAs that we do from time to time. You get also 60% off the American Prospect magazine, which I write for, which everyone should read and is an excellent resource. And just, there's like chats and, hangs, and you can suggest guests. This Friday, on our Fantastic Friday, we're going to have Anthony from Ukraine Without the Hype, which I'm really excited about. That's an excellent podcast on the Ukraine-Russia war. So make sure you're here for that. And without further ado, we got to just get into this, you guys. We just have to kind of throw ourselves headlong into all the shite, all of the things. This is What Are You Bitching About? Okay, so I'm going to briefly tell you what has been really bothering me. Number one, tariffs, obviously. And as I've been covering the fallout of the LA wildfires, being someone who having been here, someone who's here, and someone who knows people who have been directly affected by the fires, people who are still rebuilding, people who still don't know what they're going to do, and if they're ever going to be able to go back to their, homes, which were their only assets, or their places where they grew up. You've got tariffs that are coming down on, of course, lumber, aluminum, anything else you might need to, I don't know, rebuild a home. And this was explicitly something that representatives in California were begging Donald Trump when he made his visit here. Remember, he didn't visit Altadena, which was the most impacted area, the most deaths in Altadena. Didn't bother in his 4 or 5 day visit to even make a half an hour trek over there. I guess because it's a historically Black community. Nah. So there was they were imploring him, hey, don't do these tariffs. It's going to affect people rebuilding. And of course, he's going through with them 25% on Mexico and Canada, and then another 20% on China. But in addition to that, and this is kind of what I'm bitching about more broadly, and I want to be following this, but Governor Karen Bass Mayor Karen Bass, not governor. She wishes she will be one day, maybe, if it all doesn't come crashing down and Rick Caruso runs. But Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles has fired the chief of the fire department. Kristen Crowley, if you all remember, Kristen Crowley was making the rounds during the recovery efforts and the containment efforts. And she was asked point blank, was there funding for the fire department? Was there enough money? And she said, frankly, we weren't fully funded, in terms of they needed, I believe it was training funding had been cut. The number of fire engines weren't complete. And look, there are varying degrees of would more funding have helped, but it couldn't have hurt, could it? Would, I don't know, the defunding of another bloated department, the police, have somewhat helped? We've looked at the line items of how much the cops in this city receive versus the fire department. And for saying that, which, by the way, if you watched any of the interviews with the LA Fire Chief Kristen Crowley, she was very much pulling her punches, did not name Karen Bass, was not trying to go negative against Karen Bass. And of course, because she's a woman, I believe she's a lesbian as well, was facing all kinds of misogynist and homophobic attacks because of who she was. It's DEI. It's because she was. And instead of standing by her, thanking her for her service, standing by the response, if you really believe the response was good, as Karen Bass says it was good, instead of standing by her chief, no, she fires her. So again, it doesn't matter because the right won't love you. Rick Caruso's not going to give you any props. He would hit you anyway. If you fired her, he's going to blame you, saying you covered your tracks. If you kept her on, he's going to blame you, saying that you're, emboldening someone who was feckless or didn't do their job, and on and on and on. And it's just another microcosm of the way Democrats cede this ground and agree to cut out their people from underneath them because of these bad faith attacks on them. So, look, I cannot say what is going to happen to Karen Bass, but this is a bad omen. It's not winning her favors for what would otherwise be her base, including firefighters who were outside supporting Kristen Crowley. Now, I believe this can be overturned by a city council vote. I don't think it will be. But that's just sort of an insight to all the fallout from the fires, political fallout from the fires. The night of the fires, your girl could not sleep, of course. It smelled like, a campfire right next to you. You're just inhaling that. And so what did I do? Just for those few precious hours before I realized I had to evacuate, I popped a Sunset Lake CBD Goodnight gummy full of CBD, CBN, and yes, a milligram of THC, which, if you haven't heard my pitch on this, very important because it gets your mind to relax. Your body has to calm down and your mind has to calm down. It doesn't matter if your body's tired. We all know the mind will keep you going. Sunset Lake CBD and their sleep products help me. And right now, because of daylight saving time, which somehow is still a thing. How is it still a thing? How is this daylight savings the one thing that Elon has kept intact? Obviously, after this, we will see, because I think we're going back to what it should be. But they're having a sale, 35% off with coupon code DAYLIGHT35. So everybody, sunsetlakecbd.com, just incredible company based out of Vermont. Obviously, like kudos to Vermont for putting up that fight against JD Vance's little skiing outing. Usually it's a 20% coupon if you're listening in the future and you miss the sale window. That's okay. Use the coupon code FRANTIFA. But for those who are trying to try something, see if it works for you, sleep gummies, goodnight oil, all those products, Daylight 35 that's like a good sale. That's like a don't just leave in your shopping cart sale. That's like a do that sale. You know what I'm saying? Daylight 35, check them out. And with that, y'all, we got to bring him back in. Oh boy. Such a great guest, such a wonderful person, such a great comic. You might know him from What We Do in the Shadows or The President Show. He streams daily on his own Twitch called Coffee with Tony. Please welcome Anthony Atamanuik.
Hey, look, I got my Altadena hat on.
Dude, that's so sweet.
I donated money. I donated so much money during the fires to Altadena to just individual families.
That's so nice.
I didn't want to do a large thing. I also feel like this is like my half transition to James Carville. Like I'm almost just like I should just tell you, Fran, here's the problem with the Democrats.
Just play dead like the gator that I grabbed.
Listen, I'll give them a month and they're going to collapse on themselves.
We need to do that the entire way through. It's the only way I can actually deal with the news right now.
I've tuned out. I want to say, I mean, I've been on hiatus from my live stream. Thank you for plugging it, but I have not done it since.
You can't even do coffee?
You know what happened was this ties into what I'm bitching about, which is, I think the last time I was on here was actually maybe when I was still filming Shadows over prior to the summer. And, I felt like Kathy Bates in Primary Colors. I finally, after decades, drank the Kool-Aid and was willing to sort of like buy that the Democrats could somehow win this. And I checked all my logic and reason, and I just said, okay, we'll get this heavy lift done, and it will just bring about a domino effect of change that will eventually elevate the left into positions of power. I believed it. I wholeheartedly believed, even, by the way, and I was a person who was not into what happened to Biden. Even though I wish Biden had withdrawn. I wish Biden had withdrawn on his own, but I didn't like the way it went. I thought it was a bad move publicly. And I think it showed the collusion of the true corporate AI tech Democrats, particularly Pelosi and Obama, and their sort of belief that they could tech their way through. And I sort of enjoyed Biden's middle finger in the form of not allowing there to be a primary. Like, I almost was like, you know what? Okay, I get it. You're so pissed. You've been fucked. You fucked yourself, but now you're going to say fuck you. And Kamala was the fuck you to the whole thing. And that's not her fault, but whatever. The point is that
he definitely, he fucked her campaign for sure. It was like, sure, do with this what you will. Here's my sloppy seconds. There's it's like a already grazed plate of nachos. There's something in there.
Yes, and to me, there was a certain point where I was like, I think you're going to lose, and you're like, I just want to meet as many celebrities as possible before the election day. And so I think it just became like the way they have Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. It was just like, she's like, how can I meet Elton John? Can I meet this person? So like, when he got elected, I think I just sort of my brain broke.
Sure.
And not in the sense of lack of understanding of reality, but in a sort of like, oh yeah, what was I thinking? Like I had to reflect on myself.
Right. You caught yourself hoping.
Yes. And Hope, I've always not been a fan of Hope. I didn't like the Hope and Change I didn't like Hope and Change as a slogan. I think Hope is condescending. I think the concept of Hope is actually.
What about joy?
I love joy. And I just think it is. It's really like the masses get hope, because the whole point of hope is it never comes. It's always just on the horizon.
We're about to get to the hope point.
Right. So I went through a big thing, and one of my things is just today. I got a little message from Chris Murphy. Chris Murphy let me know about all he's doing to keep us, in this constitutional crisis up to date on what's going on. And Chris made sure at the end of that long text just to leave a link in case I wanted to give more fucking money to the Democratic Party. And the gall on these people the day after the election to be sending fundraising emails. I was so disgusted. And so my bitch is the Democrats. I know people go, well, don't blame the Democrats and don't do that. I don't care about Trump and the Republicans. I don't care about it. They're their own horrible thing, and there'll be all these messed up things that'll happen. I don't care about it. Yep. What I care about is a pathetic, a sold out, entrenched party that I don't know who they represent. And I see some of these younger members of the Democratic Party, especially, and you have women of color, all kinds of backgrounds of people, men of color, people who are non-Judeo-Christian, who are trying to toe this line because they know their money is wrapped up. The DNC's money is wrapped up in it. And this hostage crisis that is going on in the Democratic Party is so disgusting. It makes me repulsed and wants them to lose. Like, I don't want them to win in the midterms. I don't want this current power structure to win. Right. I don't want Hakeem Jeffries to have any power because he is a smug, condescending jerk.
Well, because he's proven that he's not going to do anything truly different with it.
No.
He's not going to actually ever legislate against the very corporatocracy that got us Donald Trump and Elon Musk in the first place. He wants to try to play the game, but with a, United Shades of Benetton face and again, fake pandering to communities that he actually doesn't even stick his neck out for or propose anything concrete for. So, I mean, I may not go there all the way with you on I don't want them to win in the midterms, but I definitely agree that Hakeem Jeffries has lost the right to lead the party.
I'm going to tell you that unless this party collapses, unless the Democratic infrastructure completely collapses, if they get power again, they will sweep everybody under the rug. I look at Zohan for New Year's going to close the lens to mayoral bitching. Here's a great candidate, great messaging. I'm excited to hear what your guest has to say because I think his messaging is incredible.
Yeah.
And it shows that leftist principles are pragmatism. In fact, you can capture right-wingers with leftist principles because it's about pragmatism. Yep. It's about actually making something work. So much of the right's criticism, if you bore down underneath all the BS, has to do with the mismanagement of money. There are people who actually believe that. They don't have an ideological bent towards restricting people's lives. They don't really care about what you do in your private life. They actually are bothered by the waste of money or the lack of explanation as to why something is spent the way it is. And here's someone who's saying, not only will I show you government in action, I will do things like government, like city-run grocery stores that will compete. I have been talking about this for years. Why is the federal government not in the business of, why don't we have a federally made car? Let's have a federally, Obama's gift to us, which was killing the public option. This idea that we can't have government competing in order to control prices, which is the best way to create price controls. Forget the omnipresent hand of the government pushing down prices through some sort of authority. They'll be challenged in courts. You enter the market, and by entering the market, you control prices. Look at eggs. They're driving the price of eggs up, not because of bird flu, because they're greedy, because they know they can do it because people are scared. So my point is that Andrew Cuomo is the Chris Murphy, is the Hakeem Jeffries. Yes. It is the indication that whenever we get the slightest bit of movement, there is some monster in the corner waiting to gobble it all up and give us nothing but corporate finance platitudinal garbage. And that is my bitching, is I am so radicalized. I am probably, like you said, I am further now to the point where I believe we need accelerationism in the Democratic Party. Destroy it so it can be rebuilt.
There
you go.
Woo!
That's what I
well,
think.
I'm excited to talk about to and not about that. I mean, if they can't get a good message, it's like, what good are they? Anyway, but
Yes.
we're gonna get into our stories. But first, Anthony, since you've been here and
I
since
did
the
it quick, right?
reelection
Okay.
of Donald Trump, it was super quick.
Okay.
We have instituted a new segment, and we call it Orange Man Bad, and it's to put all of the stories, all the bad, in one little neat place. Here we go.
Okay.
Oh, I really started from the beginning.
This is lovely.
I know, it's good, right? So this is
There's
bad.
no story. This is
good.
just it, right?
It's just the music. Well, it's just a moment of silence.
Okay.
Orange Man's tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China are going into effect, in which companies are now warning will mean a price hike in all of their goods on everyday people. And I'm just glad that I already bought all the fentanyl I needed last week. So. Orange Man is threatening federal funding for any school that allows for so-called illegal protesters, read pro-Palestine protesters, on its campus. And I'm just waiting, Anthony, for like the hummus is Israeli executive order. Like, don't you think that's coming next? If you call hummus Palestinian,
Yeah.
deported.
Yeah, they should call it, yes, absolutely, the Gulf of Israeli hummus.
Orange Man's personal attorney, I don't know if you saw this, Alina Habba, boasted about stealing back the illegally taken classified documents that Trump kept in his bathroom at Mar-a-Lago. I guess nothing keeps the Mar-a-Lago guests regular like state secrets. And Orange Man issued an executive order calling for more logging of U.S. forests for timber in order to stop forest fires.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I agree. Like, I don't think any more trees need to burn in fires. Just only homes.
Absolutely.
Only homes. Orange Man is canceling telehealth for Medicare. So if you see like a 79 Buick going 10 miles an hour in a 35, that's just Pop trying to get to his appointment.
Wow.
You give him space.
Wow. They don't care.
They don't care. They want people.
They don't even care about their own constituents.
No, not at all. I know. Oh my God. Orange Man Supreme Court has ruled the EPA can't regulate sewage out of water supplies.
Oh, great.
I know.
Well, more bottled water for everybody.
Exactly. Trump bottled water is dropping this afternoon? And Orange Man is also creating a crypto federal reserve, which means the Treasury will be buying Bitcoin, but maybe even meme coin, maybe even an NFT for old time's sake. It's going to be so sick when
Take
we're
your money.
Yeah, we're going to all be working in like the mines in China because our government sold us out for a Bored Ape NFT.
Cash out your Roth. I mean, anyone who has any form of investments or money in banks, get your money out now before the run happens, because it's going to happen within a month.
Dude, don't even.
I'm telling you.
I can't even think about that.
Put your money in a mattress.
So, real talk though, Anthony, I'm getting major Argentina, like 2001 vibes off of this, which is like massive economic collapse and bank accounts frozen next day. Imagine your bank account froze and the next day it was worth a third of what it was worth before. Right. Now, I've been told that no. And, folks, who are much smarter than me are like, the markets are going to bounce back. And I'm like, I don't know, buddy. I don't know.
No, it's bullshit. Here's the thing, everyone. This is the same mantra that we've been hearing about everything. The courts will make sure, and the institutions will hold, and this system will work, and there's water in the hydrants. And turns out it's not true. It turns out it's all a lie, and we've all been lying to ourselves, and this car's been running on fumes since like 1981. This car has been running on fumes for a long time, and I'm going to say that you say Argentina in 2000. I say this is Russia. This is the USSR in October of 1990. This is the dream, because I always try when I have a discussion with somebody about this recently. Russia still exists, right? It's just the USSR collapsed, right? So the sort of the larger picture fell apart, and then, Putin's been trying to reclaim a lot of that, some of that land, if he can, right? That's been one of the great dreams, is to do to us what was done to them. And it's now going to happen. The United States will go away. There will still be an America, but the United States is gone. And so we have another year and the United States will be gone. I will tell you, by June, you will have states that will be economically seceding from the federal government.
California actually, I think, has a proposal. There's a petition being circulated. Denmark jokingly floated to buy us, and I'm like all for it.
Yes. There should be secession now.
Yes, 100%. We, by the way, I didn't even include, and I don't have a joke for this, Anthony, but the head of the FDA has been appointed, and he is a lawyer who litigated in favor of a formula company, or the Abbott company, if you remember that, that deliberately, or not deliberately,
was it lead,
knew that they had, like lead or asbestos or something awful in baby formula.
Yeah.
That's the head of the FDA.
Yeah. Good luck getting a flu vaccine. Good luck getting, I really am. I really believe that confrontation with the governor of Maine that happened a week or so ago, we'll see you in court, right?
Yep.
And when she said later, well, we could just cut the federal. I do think that one of the big problems in how we are governing is that we're always catching up to what they do. And if they're going to play wrestling, and they've been playing wrestling for a decade now, we need to make the big turn. We need to make the move. And I think that a coalition of states should just marshal militias, purge police, purge state police of any person who showed any signs of supporting MAGA or Trump. I think we need to do the things that are undemocratic and are actually would be considered, maybe even fascistic, and just strip people of power who have a belief in the current government, and create alliances between states, pool our money, and start a war.
I think, I actually, you have had more CBD gummies than I have, but I also think that you're not wrong, that bold action is needed, and something that is very out of the box. That being said, they have all the guns. All the psychos have all the guns. So we need a little bit more time. But no, let's get into the week, because we gotta, this is all very sexy Civil War talk, but I think we need something even sexier, which is Social Security.
I love it.
This is the week where. So this is the week where the unthinkable protected social safety net program that everybody loves, that enjoys massive support, Social Security, basically retirement funds, is now on the chopping block. This is after Elon has been claiming that 150-year-olds have been collecting Social Security checks when they have not. They just misread. Doggy doesn't know how to understand the system. Payment system. Social Security payment system has never missed a single payment. But now the Trump administration is going to fire, it looks like, half of all staff, 50%. They've received buyout letters already. Let me just throw this up. This is from CNBC. They sent a notice to employees, gives them until March 14th to decide whether to take an early buyout. Unlike a previous January offer, this is now includes service employees, staffing reductions in an area that may impact how the agency processes benefit claims and other services. Again, 50% is the estimate on that. And the former Social Security Commissioner, presidential candidate, and former presidential candidate Martin O'Malley, if you remember that guy.
Oh, I remember Martin.
Good old Martin. He was such a sweet guy, good-looking guy. Was trying to, not really his time, but he says that Social Security could collapse within 30 to 90 days.
Yeah.
That is what's this is, this is all to trigger my mom. Basically, all of these things that are happening, it's like destroying national parks.
Yep.
For Social Security, it's like all the things my mom loves. She's like, no.
Yeah.
So shout out to you, Ma. But we're gonna fight this. Still, it is wild. Obviously, there's like a fight back happening. The union is saying it'll take a while for the effects to be felt, but they're coming. They are saying that the checks are likely going to be delayed, and the impact could be far worse, is this quote from the head of the American Federation of Government Employees, which we've talked about, AFGE, could be far worse than even the defunding of Medicaid.
Yeah.
Definitely more people on Social Security, I believe. And I have a lot to say about why the fuck we're in this situation, and it has everything to do, Anthony, with what you've been talking about, which is Democrats and centrists and never Trump Republicans have undermined the importance of Social Security now for decades.
Yes.
So of course a fucking Elon would come along and try to obliterate it, because that's what happens when you give all this permission to like go after these programs, or like, oh yeah, it is kind of, it might be expensive, and it's like, shut up and start explaining what it actually does and whether or not all the lies that are spun about it are true. And so Mr. Dumbass was interviewed by a bigger dumbass, Joe Rogan.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the conversation that they have about Social Security, which obviously, because it's Rogan, goes completely unchecked. And we're going to check it and talk about it a little bit, but take a look.
I mean, the government's one big pyramid scheme, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, you can tell me better than anybody.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
Yeah, not you.
Right, explain that.
Oh, so,
Exactly.
well, people pay into Social Security, and the money goes out of Social Security immediately, but the obligation for Social Security is your entire retirement career. So when you look at the future obligations of Social Security, the actual national debt is like double what people think it is.
Well, who gives a shit?
Because of
Shut the
future
fuck up,
obligations.
dude.
So
That's the best part. Wait, first of all, not all of this is a lie, but my favorite, we have to replay this because
Sorry. Did I talk
Rogan,
over
no,
it?
no, you didn't. But
groan?
Rogan going like, like,
Yeah.
I get it, don't at all.
it is because of the future obligations. So basically, people are living way longer than
But wait,
expected.
pause it for a sec. That groan isn't just that he doesn't get it. That groan is him sitting in this room with this bullshit artist, knowing he's bullshitting, and being like, "Your bullshit is not." There's a
almost
judgment in that groan.
Yeah.
There's
totally,
a judgment in
totally.
that groan that's like,
Totally.
you're kind of there. That's what's amazing, is that it's just like this sad sack of shit, this walking fucking death. Like literally the only thing that Elon would serve would be the ground and worms. That's the only function he serves.
is really giving like Porky Pig halfway through like a T2 nuclear meltdown.
Yes.
Like, right?
Well, keep playing. I'm sorry. He makes me so angry.
Yes. Well, this is pretty much the worst piece of misinformation I've seen in a long time. Oh.
So basically, people are living way longer than expected, and
That's also not true.
there are fewer babies being born. So you have more people who are retired and get that
Welcome, by the way, number 14 of Elon's.
live
Yes.
for a long time and get retirement payments. So the future obligation. So however bad the financial situation is right now for the federal government, it will be much worse in the future.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually not bad now, though. That's the other thing. It's
a
not
lie.
bad. You're making it bad. And so, number one, we just have to talk about like this future obligations and the national debt. No. Social Security doesn't add to the national debt, just as it is, as it stands. And also because workers are the ones generating the revenue every single fucking year. And in fact, there's a surplus of money.
Yes.
It is dwindling, and we'll talk about that. It needs to be shored up. But, and I have to pull some clips from my favorite Social Security zaddy, Sam Seder,
Yes.
who explains some of this and does a very good job doing so. Right before this is, he talks about this in sort of the biggest myths about Social Security. But number one, if Social Security can run out of money if everyone disappears,
Yes.
if tomorrow everybody disappeared, Americans just like the leftovers.
What Jesus takes people.
Exactly. The thing, when Jesus comes, that's
Rapture.
The rapture comes, then of course Social Security would be so screwed if the rapture came.
Yeah.
But more importantly, this trust fund, which is like sort of, again, the surplus of funds that are still there that are pulled from, that is, by conservative estimates, 2035, it will be lessened, but not to zero. Here is Sam explaining.
The trust fund is going to run out in 2035 if nothing is done, and we'll get to that in a second. And then Social Security will pay out 83% of scheduled benefits. There'll be a 17% cut if nothing's done in 2035, starting in 2035. And again, incidentally, that 2035 number is a conservative estimate. As we get closer, it'll probably go further out. But let's just use that estimate. And it will pay 83% of benefits for the next 63 years. And if nothing is done, it will then pay only 73% of benefits. Incidentally, almost everyone listening to this program right now will be dead.
So there you have it, right? For 65 years, if nothing is done, there will be a 17% decrease if nothing is done, which still sucks. But 83% of scheduled benefits will be paid out. After that, it's 65% if nothing is done, and we will likely all be dead. It's 98 years, I believe, until that kicks in. Right. So he's explaining it's not going bankrupt. It is not failing its audits like the fucking Pentagon. And the one thing that could help, and Sam and the Majority Report and Emma do a great job of explaining this kind of stuff. The one thing that could help is if there wasn't a cap on the income when it comes to what percentage you put into Social Security, because it turns out that millionaires are paying the exact same amount on their salaries into Social Security as someone who's making $176,000 a year, which is wild. So watch, and they sort of do the math for you that it's 6.2%, but that does not go up the more money you make, which is so wild. And this was only enacted in the 80s. So it wasn't always like this. We were pulling more money.
Of course it was.
But because, as we talked about, fucking Democrats and politicians love to gut these programs that are wildly successful, and it kept seniors out of poverty, kept our country an actual so-called first world nation. So they explain that, and I like this.
6.2 only on the first 176. So you don't even have to do the 6.2%, because if you make $3 million, again, it's 10,912. So just so
it keeps on going up, right? So if you're like 30,000 a year, 50,000 a year, okay, you're sort of incrementally paying more, and then it stops out at $10,912 is the max that any rich person would ever pay into Social Security.
Equals 10,912. If you make $100 million a year, and I'm just assuming this is as a wage, you pay $10,912. So the point is that our system caps it at 176. The problem is that we need to raise the cap on Social Security.
Yep.
That's the only problem. That so many people are making $400,000 or $3 million or $100 million that we are not touching the same amount of wages that we were in 1983.
So I just really appreciate them breaking that down, and like those two aspects, right? It's not going insolvent,
right?
And there's a simple fucking fix, but
easy
instead
fix. Means testing, a different form of means testing.
Totally.
That's the irony, is it's a different type. Instead of means testing, right? Because there was a whole thing where they were like, well, if people with money shouldn't get Social Security, and it's like that red herring was put out there purposely to distract from this simple answer, which is, no, it's not about cutting the rich out because they pay and they shouldn't get it because they're rich. It's that they should be paying more. But
exactly.
This is Reagan. Listen, we all live in the horrors of the most evil human being ever to walk this planet, Ronald Reagan. I mean, Donald Trump is nothing compared to the most horrible person who I hope he and his wife are tortured in whatever exists after death. I hope they suffer in every possible way for all eternity, that they feel pain physical pain despite being dead for the rest of their lives. And I want to say, in terms of this whole notion even of solvency debt and so on, I mean, we both know Stephanie Kelton, which is even the idea of the pocketbook, the national pocketbook, which has more to do with Trump has done more damage to the national pocketbook by weakening our relationship with our allies, by weakening our military standing in the world. You want to talk about where our wealth comes from? It comes from the tip of the gun pointed at everybody else.
Right.
Our military might is a huge part of why we can overspend and run debt the way we do. And I'm not saying we should have some big, Pentagon, keep the Pentagon going. I'm just saying that this idea that we're even running out of money is such a fiction. And this is where Democrats, who have negotiated away anything, you look at the fact that we could have had single payer in 1932, 34, 35, but we didn't. We got Social Security. The dream of Roosevelt gets continued to Truman. Truman, who desperately wanted nationalized health care, right? Desperately wanted nationalized health care, couldn't achieve it. And then LBJ, despite murdering Kennedy with his own two hands, but I'm kidding. But like that, LBJ was able to at least achieve Medicare and Medicaid, or I think just maybe Medicare. I don't know if his achievement was also Medicaid. I don't know the history. I didn't pay attention that long in the podcast. That you see the achievements Democrats have, and then Nixon shows up, and for some reason, ever since that point, whatever happened with the late great Jimmy Carter, for some reason Democrats ran away from basically creating the conditions that made this country quote unquote great.
Yep.
And maybe it's
that's the biggest irony. And we have to move on to our next.
Oh yes.
But I do think that the biggest irony of all of this is that Trump and the MAGA base are really pining away for a time when we had a massive tax on the wealthy and when the corporations paid far more of their fair share. Yeah, they're also pining away for segregation and shit like that. But desegregation is not the reason that we're poor.
Yes,
it is the wealthy and the 1% taking far more than their fair share and not having to whatever. They're pining away for expansion of the social safety net. And again,
it's unfettered capitalism and socialism for the rich.
Exactly.
And so if we didn't have those things, we wouldn't be dealing with any of the garbage we're talking about. And we certainly wouldn't be negotiating and having a conversation about why collectively taking care of ourselves and making sure that our people are taken care of is part of the benefit of being supposedly the greatest country on earth. That instead we're nickel and diming each other.
No, instead we should just get seniors to cage match each other, UFC style, for their, we could monetize it.
Well, thank you for having me on. I know
you're not done.
Oh, I thought you were having your other guest
we gotta get another story in here.
Okay. I thought you were shuffling me off.
I'm not shuffling you off. I'm shuffling us to a different story because we got to pivot.
Okay.
Because it's been a few weeks and we haven't spoken, since the so-called ceasefire. We haven't talked that much about, what's going on in Palestine. And there was a massive moment this week where No Other Land won Best Documentary at the Oscars, standing O from a lot of people, big applause breaks. It's a film that really, and if you don't know it, it tells the story. I don't blame you because it has no U.S. distribution. If you are lucky to have been at a few screenings, and I hope there are more, you know what it's about, you've seen it. But it's about the town in the West Bank called Masafer Yatta, and it documents over 5 years what happens to many towns in the West Bank, which is the encroachment of the Israeli military, the settler encroachment, the violence, the displacement, on and on. The filmmakers are two Palestinians, Basil Adra and Hamdan Balal, and two Israelis, Yuval Abraham and Rachel Zor. And here are Basil and Yuval accepting their award on Sunday. And it's just a really moving moment. I don't think we've ever heard this ever, at least not on the Oscars.
For the award. It's such a big honor for the four of us and everybody supported us for this documentary. About 2 months ago, I became a father, and my hope to my daughter that she will not have to live the same life I'm living now, always fearing always fearing settlers' violence, home demolitions, and forcible displacements.
Home demolitions, forcible displacement. And I just love that they applauded him at his line about his father, his daughter, excuse me.
That my community, Masafri Yatta, is living and facing every day under the Israeli occupation. No other land reflect the harsh reality that we have been enduring for decades and still resist, as we call on the world to take serious actions to stop the injustice and to stop the ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people.
Yeah.
He straight up said ethnic cleansing. Notice he didn't say genocide. He didn't want to trigger anybody.
We made this film, Palestinians and Israelis, because together our voices are stronger. We see each other. The atrocious destruction of Gaza and its people, which must end. The Israeli hostages brutally taken in the crime of October 7th, which must be freed. When I look at Bassel, I see my brother, but we are unequal. We live in a regime where I am free under civilian law, and Bassel is under military laws that destroy his life and he cannot control. There is a different path, a political solution without ethnic supremacy, with national rights for both of our people. And I have to say, as I am here, the foreign policy in this country is helping to block this path. And
now, this is a line that, like, I feel like if Biden were still in office, it does not get an applause break.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. It's the same foreign policy.
Right, exactly. It's like, and the foreign policy in this country, everyone was like, yes, we saw the AI generated Gaza.
You know, why? Can't you see that we are intertwined? That my people can be truly safe if Bassel's people are truly free and safe. There is another way.
I really appreciated that, there is another way, and my safety is linked to their freedom and their safety as well. And safety is a right for all people. And so that was just so moving.
And reasonable. Here's the crazy thing.
Exactly.
I listen to that and go, what a reasonable thing someone went up and said. A very reasonable, everyone just said very truthful, reasonable things. And you still have people I see on my Instagram roll, comedians who for some reason are still screaming and kicking about anything they can to be just racist towards Muslims and to somehow connect their Judaism with Zionism. And I don't know how. I guess you jumped on this bandwagon too fast, and then you realized, oh my God, I'm associating with some of the worst hate that, and the same tactics the Nazis deployed against our very own people. And you can't get out of that Gordian knot now. So you're just doubling and tripling down. And yet here's a reasonable statement where, it always frustrates me that you have Jews, in particular Jews who are so vocal in a way that is so ugly. And there are so many of us, including myself, who want nothing to do with it, want nothing to do with the sick, twisted views of people who are willing to support such a violent government. It's despicable. So I'm very glad that it was spoken, and it's not anti-Semitic. What I said is not anti-Semitic. That is such a lie. That is such a lie created by people. But I love that it happened. But, listen, Hollywood and the applause lines and all that is great. But, the Oscars, I mean, everybody is doing whatever they can to seem right in the moment.
Totally. Is it okay now? But speaking of that violence, and speaking of the West Bank, it is really, it's really gotten awful in the last, even since the ceasefire was announced. This week, Israel basically said there's not going to be a second phase of the ceasefire. Remember, the first phase was basically like, prisoner exchange. They are saying, no, there's not going to be a second phase, which would be full withdrawal from Gaza.
Of course not.
They're halting the aid to Gaza after refusing to move to that second phase. It was supposed to lead to the lasting end of the war. Instead, Israel's called for extending the first stage of the deal to release more Israeli captives without committing to a permanent ceasefire proposal. Hamas rejected. And in terms of this mass starvation tactic, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir called for mass starvation of Hamas and its supporters in Gaza, saying the war should resume with, quote, tremendous force.
Sure.
To make that happen, Gaza must endure hell, and hell also means bombing all the aid depots that Hamas holds. In other words, the aid they just straight up let in.
Yeah, well, Hamas is a perfect word now for anything that is not Israel. And also Hamas and the Palestinian people, you know, this Iranian wing of paramilitary, because Hamas is an extension of Iran. I mean, it is. I mean,
I wouldn't call it extension, but it is.
They are a financial extension partially of them, and that's been cut off. And I think that Iran, I'm saying it to say it this way, cynically, there are a lot of parties involved in Arab and Persian and Western states that are all seeing money now. And they see Gaza as this problem that they can turn away from in different ways, and they can ring a bell publicly. But I think a lot of the moneyed interests in the Arabian Peninsula, in Iran, and of course in the United States, I think that everyone is gaming to figure out how to exploit that now demolished area.
I mean, this is a good
really
question.
do.
I sort of disagree, because I feel like Trump's been so ham-fisted in it that a lot of countries that sort of in name only were supporting Palestinians are now being forced to be like, ooh, we don't want to like do bilateral negotiations with Israel and cut the Palestinian people out, because they're also facing backlash in their own countries as well. But I just want to mention what's going on in the West Bank really briefly. It's the largest number of forcibly displaced Palestinians in the West Bank since 1967. We're talking 40,000 people have been displaced from the West Bank. This is a photo of Netanyahu with a bunch of military, generals, whomever, in the home of a Palestinian family.
Yeah.
In Tulkarm. And he was sitting there. He posted a picture of himself. This is according to Diana Butu of Zeteo. Posted himself sitting in the seated in the house of a Palestinian family. On the wall, they put up an Israeli flag. And as they took over the house, Netanyahu's army generals casually sat on their living room furniture and made themselves at home in a place that is not their home, a place that they were not invited to, and which they don't belong. And here's another image of women. This is just from this February, fleeing their homes. Again, a bulldozer. I know it looks like a bulldozer, but it's sort of a burned out wall looms behind them. It might be a bulldozer. I cannot see, but it is like terrifying. And this is on top of the fact that Israel is dropping leaflets telling Palestinians of the West Bank they, quote, have no future in Palestine. And they are dropping them as a pretense, again, for this massive ethnic cleansing that is happening.
Yeah.
Biggest displacement since 67.
I want to just very quickly just make sure it's clear that I am concerned that the Palestinians are going to get abandoned by everyone.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's what I'm saying, is that cynically, I believe people see either dollar signs or they see opportunity for resources or position with a feckless American government.
Sure.
And I think people preserve themselves, and they look at this situation the way that Armenians are abandoned internationally by almost everybody. And so this is not a gleeful take on the idea that, they got theirs. It is very, very sad, because I don't see a version where this...
Well, the funds have dried up. Like Iran's funds have definitely dried up. And in part because of...
fucked.
Right, exactly. Because of the Trump administration as well. So it's...
Yes.
But that image of Netanyahu sitting there, it's like he might as well be fucking putting on lingerie and all the other things that the IDF has been doing in Gaza, and
it's
raiding. It's just terrifying. And on that horrible note,
yeah.
Anthony, are you going to be back doing Coffee with Tony on Twitch?
Well, you know what? This is my big announcement. Coming in April, some form of Coffee with Tony will return. Once I have gotten through all of my you come see me at South by Southwest.
Okay, amazing.
This weekend, we're performing with James Adomian. We'll be reuniting. I'll be playing RFK Jr.
Yes.
No More Trump. I have shows at Upright Citizens Brigade in New York on 14th Street, March 17th on St. Patty's Day evening.
Yes.
And then April 3rd, I bring my character Lyle Mesmer, the Mentalist, back at the UCB New York. And so you could check me out at The Real Actual Tony on Instagram for all new information. But yes, I'm doing a little bit of a reset.
Is Adomian Elon?
He'll be playing Elon. And I will be, yes. And I gave my big shout out to Francesca. I want to say, even though you're a comedian, you're a journalist in my book.
Thanks, dude. Thank you very much. You did it. You did a shout out
in the Hollywood Reporter.
The Hollywood Reporter. Shit, man. I never get mentioned in that rag. Thank you, Anthony. You're the best. You. Come back very, very soon. And thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to bring in to talk about all of this and more, and someone who is letting us know that there are organizations led by Palestinians and Israelis that are messaging similarly to the way that this film is messaging about, an intertwined fate and path, because that's what she does. She is a researcher, a message maker, a campaign strategist to progressive and democratic causes, and this is the world over as well. She is studied movements and messaging around the world. She is the host of Words to Win By, a podcast about those progressive wins around the world and how they were achieved. Please welcome Anat Shenker-Osorio. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate you being here. I've really been relishing in all the interviews that you've done, but a special shout out to the Anti-Authoritarian podcast for their interview with you following the re-election of Donald Trump that everyone should check out. We need you and we need your insights in this moment. And I don't know, I think let's start with the Democratic Party.
Really? Do we have to?
I mean, no, I mean, this is, Tony and I are, starting off top very angry. James Carvilles of the world are saying the Democrats should roll over and play dead and wait for the Republicans to sort of, give him enough rope and they hang himself with. Maybe just give me a response to that idea of playing dead. The Republicans are going to screw themselves. Don't worry, it'll all work out. What is your reaction as someone who works on messaging?
Maybe we shouldn't be deriving campaign advice from a person who last campaigned in the Mesozoic era. That's off the top of my head. But more seriously, it's really astonishing that everywhere else I have either worked or partnered or observed, I'm talking about the really rapid fire defeat thanks to the NPF in France of Le Pen. I'm talking about the extraordinary anti-autocracy campaign against the Law and Justice Party in Poland. I'm talking about defeating Bolsonaro in Brazil, talking about the courage of Slovenian activists to take on their own autocrat. I could go on, that in every other place, the opposition party relishes being in the opposition. That they view it as their way to get notoriety. And for good and for ill, politicians are at their core, and they need to be, let's just be fair, a certain level of narcissist. You have to, in order to want to do that job, be at least somewhat a look at me, look at me, look at me person. And I have watched...
Also podcaster, but yeah.
Purportedly grown men, leaders within the Democratic Party, privately throw hissy fits because AOC and others get their day in the light and get their millions of followers. And why do I not pout, 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 shout, 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 flail, 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 have the masses behind me? And so here is your moment. Here is your Mallory McMorrow, Katie Porter with the whiteboard, AOC, truth to power, truth to each other moment that people are desperate for.
Mm-hmm.
And so my response to it is that we have been living inside of a make-believe world in which, according to pundits and campaign consultants, and really only them, the relevant access to gauge Democrats is, are they too woke or are they not?
Yep.
Which is itself a ludicrous fiction. And in reality, the access upon which voters, and most importantly, would-be voters, those disaffected folks who surged in 2020 to bring Biden to victory, 19 million of whom stayed home in 2024, the meaningful access to them, I can tell you from all of our research, is do you fight or don't you fight? That is what people are looking for. Are you going to fight with me, for me, alongside me? Or are you going to sit down, play dead, or as we heard just recently at our most recent focus groups, Democrats are like a deer in the headlight. The car is coming down the road and they just don't even get out of the way.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. You heard that. I feel like everyone, I mean, I think that's echoing a lot of what the sentiment that everyone else is feeling as well. That's very representative. And yeah, I mean, I think that what's been really revelatory is seeing the lack of fight or even the lack of foresight into what the fight might have to look like should what was being warned about during the campaign come to pass, and in which case it did. And we have these mass firing of federal workers, and I don't think they were coached on what to do when this, if and when this happens by the previous administration. But let's put that over here. You see the lack of fight and you're like, okay, well, if you're not fighting now, how was I to believe that you were ever going to fight for the things that you said you would, either on the campaign or in, in the Build Back Better bill? And in fact, obviously, we know Biden famously walked away from his very own platform, Build Back Better, which wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad platform. So I feel like we're having a very revelatory moment for a lot of these Democrats. And I think a lot of people are dubious about wanting to certainly donate again and also put their hope and faith in them. But I guess I wanted to zoom out a little bit and maybe talk or maybe talk about no. Let's keep on this, because let's talk about this this woke left BS. I want to dig into that.
Mm-hmm.
We always hear, I mean, mostly from centrists and some people on the left who say actually it is woke and it is DEI, and maybe that's not bad that it's going away. And did Kamala Harris's leaning into trans issues cost her the election, even though she didn't? Or was she too kind to immigrants, even though she wasn't? All of these things were being told about the woke left, and we need to, stop listening. The Third Way, I'm sure you're familiar with, they had their meeting this week, and their takeaways were stop listening basically to the base. Don't ever listen to anyone who's ever been in the streets. But what's your reaction to this sort of when the idea that somehow the woke left is the reason the Democrats failed in 2024?
Where to begin?
Take your time.
So it is the fundamental siren song of authoritarians to convince people that they're engaged in a counter-revolution against a revolution that never was. The Law and Justice Party came to power by pillaring the ruling party as having allowed Poland to become, quote, overrun with refugees because they'd accepted the EU quota, which amounted to less than 2%. It might have even been point something percent of the Polish population. And that they declared was they're taking over. It's everywhere. Bolsonaro's whole shtick was that gender ideology is taking over, and, a man can't be a man. And the PT, which is the equivalent of the Labor Party, Lula's party, is going to introduce, I kid you not, spread through disinformation channels via WhatsApp, penis nipples for baby bottles, an image that I had to have in my brain, and now all of you need to have in yours. But replacing the thing the baby sucks on with the thing that looks like a penis. I realize it feels like I'm
swear to
digressing.
God, the mind of a perverted man would come up with that.
It's a lot. So that's their story. Their story is, you know why your life sucks? You know why you can't send your kid to college? You know why you can't help your parents out with retirement or go fix their water heater? You know why you have more month than check? You know why you don't feel comfortable in your own community? It's because of those people. And so for the party that purports to be in opposition to authoritarianism to credit that storyline in order to take down that storyline, forget the immorality of it because they don't seem to care. Let's just focus on hard-nosed, does that win or does that not win?
Mm-hmm.
If you are attempting to beat your opposition, and you do so by parroting your opposition, then what you are doing is, by definition, feeding the both sides sentiment that has your base want to just throw in the towel and not participate in the first place.
Yeah.
What the right wing understands, both within this country and outside of it, is that instead of chiding and saying, oh, you're just preaching to the choir is where the trouble starts. And if the choir doesn't want to sing the joyful noise, and if you will excuse me, wear the odious red MAGA hat, then you cannot create what is known in psychology as social proof, which is simply the understanding that people do the thing they think people like them do. So let's look at some hard evidence. In the height of the Black Lives Matter resurgence after the murder of George Floyd, while the protests were happening, there was a 12-point jump in approval for BLM and support for their platform of, dealing with police.
Mm-hmm.
It was when the protests ended, and we see this pattern over and over and over again. The same is true as ACT UP. The same is true for the disability rights movement. The same is true for, the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot do polling to statically understand, quote unquote, where people are, because there is no place that people are. And it is, in fact, the job of a political campaign to change where they are. This is what the right understands. They use their choir, the most faithful people, to repeat their messages over and over and over again, because they understand that conflicted voters are not, in fact, centrists. They are conflicted. They toggle between competing views of, quote unquote, the way the world works. Mm-hmm. And the job of a successful political campaign, a successful movement, is to get the choir, the people who do believe, to be out and loud and proud, demonstrating social proof. This is what I believe. This is what most people believe. This is dominant common sense, in order to convert the conflicted, to bring them to you. If you keep moving into where they purportedly are, what you are doing is feeding the right-wing story.
Yes.
Another way of understanding this is that if you want to win the debate, you have to set the terms. Any and every time we agree that an election is going to be a contest between, as I like to put it, who is the bigger asshole, Democrats, despite all their trying, and you got to give them props for trying, they're not going to win that contest. If you say the way to make this electoral decision is on the basis of who is going to be more draconian, who is going to be more xenophobic, who is going to be more transphobic, that is a Republican brand advantage. If instead you say, basically what you're voting on, the story about the election itself, not merely the story about one candidate and another, is that this election is about a fork in the road between two vastly different futures. One in which you will decide for yourself what comes next, and one in which a bunch of broligarchs are going to decide for you.
Yeah.
When people are making decisions on those terms, and the data hold this up, the fundamental difference between the Harris voter and the other than Harris voter, by which I mean stayed home, third party, voted for Trump, was not a desire for the actual Project 2025 MAGA agenda. It was whether or not they believed it would come to fruition.
Yeah. And you see that even in some of the the regretful Trumpers who are like, I didn't think Project 2025 was going to really be real. And even Democrats, I think to my earlier point, doesn't seem like even they thought it was going to be real, given how frozen they are.
And how could they when, as you rightly said, they're reading environmental cues and they're trying to understand? It's extraordinary what we're seeing in focus groups right now among these cohorts of 2020 Biden surge, 24 drop off. They're like, is this a really big deal? And are we actually in a hostile takeover? And is this really a descendancy into authoritarianism?
This was pre-election or
no,
this
is now. This is now. Or is this kind of just business as usual and I'm just the one who's overreacting? People are very perplexed as to, the frogs in the boiling water analogy, and the Democrats seem to think that this is a hot tub, or at least they did in the pre-election, and now it's kind of unclear. And so if the people who are purportedly in leadership are not reacting, as you rightly said, like this is an existential crisis, then how are people meant to understand it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's a really, just to talk about what's going on now, that is so clear. I don't want to, I do, and I don't want to relitigate 2024, but just sticking on this choir theme, I think coming up on the left and in the progressive left, and, that then was sort of captivated by the Bernie movement, captivated by many of the movements, whether it's Occupy, BLM, Palestine. Sometimes it's difficult because we're always told, yeah, what you're doing is right and just and good, and most people agree with you. And yeah, sure, in BLM, my mom, again, shout her out, was like enrolled in a continuing ed studies program about racism, and it's like, what is happening? That's how impactful that movement was and has been. But really, the goal is to preach beyond the choir, always beyond the choir. Talking to the choir is bad. Preach beyond the choir. What's your response to that? Because it does seem like Democrats have, and not just Democrats, but broadly, I guess, a movement for, democracy, civil rights, human rights. It's like there is a bigger project. There's a big coalition. There's a big tent, blah, blah, blah. We're always told that means we run to the center of the tent and the choir can sing whatever the hell. Choir can go fuck itself. But so talk to me about that.
Yeah. So we know that we live in an extraordinarily fractured media environment. We know that breaking a signal through the noise is virtually impossible. That linear TV, if it is not all but dead, basically is so fragmented into hyper-specific audiences. And then we have, 80 billion different forms of other media that people consume, that there is no Walter Cronkite, there is no sort of central watering hole or water cooler, whatever. Like, people are getting information from social media, information, to be generous about the term. And so why do I bring that up? I bring that up because what is just mind-boggling, truly mind-boggling, about this idea that what we need to do is conduct a bunch of poll-tested responses. And to be clear, I'm a researcher. I do messaging research all the time with large samples, which are AKA called polls or randomized control trials. The difference is what I'm measuring for is A, what will the base actually repeat? And B, what converts the conflicted to my position? I do not go check what do the middle or what do most people already believe and how do I repeat that to them? Because I understand that my job is actually to convince people of a position that I hold. Because the purpose of winning elections is to alter the material conditions of people's lives. It is actually to implement policy. It is not simply to occupy a seat. And so, as far as preaching beyond the choir, absolutely. But how are you going to get beyond the choir?
Right. If you don't have your song down, how can people hear it?
How could people hear it? Who is going to sing it? And especially when there is no spot where you can go buy a 30-second ad, even if you could, that everyone will watch, let alone remember, because they're receiving this profusion of information. So what are the only consistent signals that have actually broken through over time? Well, BLM is one of them. Love is Love, in the heyday of what became the marriage equality movement, is one of them.
Yeah. And you talked about that. I mean, I like that example, like love is love, which is, I've heard you talk about this before, and it is much broader and more positive of a message, which I do want to talk about. And it's hard to sort of like refute it, and it also is not technical, which can be really good. And not every issue has that, but also love is love could just be a broad, like a broad like slogan for many issues. It doesn't even have to be about marriage equality, right? I guess I don't know. I wanted to quote something back to you that you said that I wanted you to say more about, which is about how the right messages versus how the left messages. And you've talked about, doing all these polls and polling the middle and then running to the middle and finding like the perfect place where everybody agrees in terms of the big tent discussion. But you said the job of a good message isn't to say what's popular, it's to make popular what needs to be said. That is brilliant in my mind. And you're saying, and the other thing you say is not only what needs to be said, and need is an operative word, depending on if you are a fascist or if you believe, we should, have a Green New Deal. But you said that the right is good at this because they're not messaging to people where they're at. They're messaging people, they're messaging where you tell me but where they're capable of going. And we are seeing that play out right now. It's not that the right is telling its base like, oh, does this feel weird to you to like deport people to Guantanamo? Does it feel weird to like snitch on your neighbors to ICE? I don't want to do that because that is kind of extreme. They're like, no. This is what we're doing. We're firing federal workers because they're enemies of the state. They're all deep state operatives. We're putting innocent people in Gitmo. And this is okay with you, right? Because we've been grooming you for years to do and condones explicitly this radical agenda. So that's what I think is so amazing, that the Democrats and the left are like, I don't know, we want to make people uncomfortable, with our radical ideas like universal health care. But the right, the right does that. And there's something captivating about saying, I'm not just telling you how it is. I'm telling you where I'm going.
Yeah. And let's just put a fine point on it, right? To make it tangible for folks, because I think some of this can maybe for some people be hard to follow. So when the right started testing the phrase critical race theory, it didn't pack the immediate punch of death panels. You hear death panel and you're like, I don't know what that is, but I know that's bad. I don't like that. I don't know what it is. Don't like it.
Death panel, which was floated under the ACA.
Yes. When people first heard critical race theory, they were like, is that where you are critical about there being too much race in things? Or is that where you are critical about the importance of race? Like, people weren't sure exactly what it meant.
Right.
And so what did the right do? And they didn't hate it. They didn't feel any way about it. They were mostly like, I don't know what that is. The same thing with DEI. I don't know what that is. I don't care. I don't have feelings about it. That's nothing to me. It's an empty vessel. So the right sees that and they're like, ah ha ha ha, an empty vessel. We shall populate it with the meaning that we require. And the meaning that they require, again, as I said, because they really only have one storyline, they just keep writing new chapters of it, is you need to blame those people. The reason for the trouble in your life, basically what they require is a continuous race, place of origin, gender, sexuality, scapegoating war in order to hide the fact and preclude people from recognizing that the actual sources of pain, the actual sources of division are the fact that the billionaires are basically fleecing us and selling the country for parts. And soon, maybe get into the business of selling our organs. I shouldn't be declaring that because I'm just giving them new ideas.
Yeah, they will. Next week.
Yeah, next week. That's for next week. So they keep at this same storyline and they keep coming up with new ways to reintroduce it through vocabulary that they populate with meaning. Consider a word like deportation. Now, what we can see among lay people, among conflicted Americans, is that they have performed the dirty magic trick of making that word now mean to people the removal of people who have committed crimes.
Right.
that already it conveys a different sense of meaning than the literal dictionary, pardon me, definition. Consider, by contrast, a word like abduction,
Mm.
which has a very different feeling. Let's consider a counter. When Citizens United happened, which is really the beginning of the acceleration of a lot of this, the Supreme Court decision that basically just allowed unending pay to play. You can purchase yourself whichever member of government you would like, up until today with Musk buying himself a Trump. So we, the left, the Democrats, just do what we always do, which is credulously call the thing, quote unquote, but that's what it's called, Anat. The name of the thing is Citizens United. I'm like, no, it fucking isn't.
Yeah,
The name
yeah.
of the thing is the name you call the thing. We could have been calling it Corporations Unleashed all along to still retain the C and the U so people would know this is the topic that we're covering. And instead, we positioned ourselves rhetorically as being against Citizens United, which
Right.
as a set of two words sounds like a good thing.
Right. And that's
And
what they
so-
do it. And they brand all their kinds of policies and reactionary moves the same way. It's always like the people united for a better tomorrow. And it's like, oh, we actually believe in grinding up babies.
And instead, again, just to like get into the nitty gritty of language, because that's where I live. And, I also do strategy and other things, but I can spend a lot of time. The choice to name the Inflation Reduction Act basically was a guarantee that it forced Democrats to spend the entire campaign saying inflation, 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 inflation. Have I talked to you about inflation? I want to bring inflation top
Or
of
even
mind.
buying into the idea that inflation was out of control, right?
Right.
Like inflation reduction means that, we have to, I mean, and yes, it's bad, but like, you're buying it. The very policy is buying into the idea that it's Biden's inflation and he's taking responsibility for it
Taking
now.
responsibility
Versus
for what he did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Versus the corporate inflation,
Or versus calling it the God Bless America Act, which
Sure.
would have allowed Democrats to be on the campaign
Or the
trail being like,
Pocketbook
we
Act.
passed God Bless America. We want God to bless, it's
Yeah.
just really basic stuff.
I mean, abduction instead of deportation is a really beautiful example of this. And I also have been just sticking with immigration, like the way you see media repeat the idea of the crackdown on immigration, just that word crackdown. It implies that somehow immigration is out of control and it is a massive problem. So then when you say crackdown, it's like, well, I guess it needed to be controlled if there's a crackdown, right? So it's just like, it's draconian, it is, authoritarian, it is an invasion of privacy, it is surveillance, all of these things that, people rightly don't like. I do want to ask you a couple more questions before I know you got to go. But we're in a massive moment of reaction, right? And there are slogans out there like fire Elon. There are people who are protesting obviously every day, every single moment there's a new fire to put out. And yet you also write about reactionary politics as not being winning politics, and that messaging not really being all that captivating. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, so this is very difficult, especially in this moment, and I want to, acknowledge that. Obviously, there are a lot of things to oppose, many, many, many things to oppose, and as we said, there will be more tomorrow and more next week. We can't
Yes.
even know all the things. So obviously, that is a true story, and we need to be doing that. The issue with having our messaging only live inside of an oppositional framework is that it unwittingly reinforces the primacy of that opposition. And one of the things that autocrats rely upon, as Ruth Ben-Ghiat, for example, she literally wrote a book called Strong Men, rely upon is presenting themselves as that strong man, as that authoritarian force, as that daddy figure,
Right.
that whatever is going on, even though they actually caused it, they are the ones to bring order. They are the ones to bring calm. They are the ones. And, I hate to tell you, like, I hate to be Cassandra on here, but I've been through a lot of autocracy in other countries and its overthrow. And so I think we all can predict what's coming next, which is that as the market continues to be in free fall, as people continue, I'm sorry to say, to feel the real economic pain of this horror show, what's going to happen is people are going to be increasingly upset, increasingly out in full force, which is necessary and important. And that is going to create a crackdown from the other side. It's going to be a stifling of dissent. It's going to be probably orders to send in the military. I mean, there's a way that these things go, right?
Yeah.
And so to the question that you asked, which I didn't forget, how could you possibly in this moment have anything positive to say? So one of the ideas, just to, again, make it tangible, because otherwise it's all just floating around in a theoretical space, is the notion that we need a free America movement. Much like de Gaulle was able to do in exile when the Nazis occupied France, he created a Free France movement, sort of a shadow government that was like, no, this is the true government of France. I think that those of us who have understood and been okay with calling this fascism for a while now and hoping the rest of the people would get around to it, we often sort of gingerly touch upon the analogy that we are rapidly approaching Nazi Germany, and, you know, what Hitler did was strictly speaking legal, right? And what freedom fighters did was strictly speaking illegal, because legal does not necessarily mean legitimate, as we know from enslavement, as we know from many, many things that were legal but not legitimate. But actually, I think the more apt analogy is not that we are rapidly approaching Nazi Germany, but rather we are rapidly approaching Nazi-occupied France. In that this regime, and I do not call it a government, again, words mean things and they matter. This is not the government. This is a regime. This regime is not legitimate. I don't care about the election. I understand what happened in the election. I can walk you through how the Roberts Court rendered that election illegitimate because it allowed a criminal to run. It granted him immunity from crimes committed against the state. He had already attempted an overthrow of that state. I could go on and on, as I'm sure you know. So what we are experiencing is the hostile takeover of our government. In this case, I do use government intentionally, by a dangerous regime of oligarchs, of Russian assets, of billionaires who are hell-bent on taking our freedoms, destroying our lives, and dismantling our livelihoods. And we need to understand ourselves as the Free America movement, as the true inheritors of a promise that we've never lived up to make this place one of liberty and justice for all. It is only when people like fully experience for themselves, oh, this is a complete break from any sort of recent norm. And actually what's required is an entire overhaul of business as usual, that we actually can stand up to these forces.
Well, I mean, and to this point, you know, you talk about, is it painting the beautiful future or some kind of vision? I mean, that to me is a reason why Democrats have not been able to hit the ground running, is because they don't actually have that vision. And I was saying the other day on a different show, but I'm like, look, I have massive critiques of Obama, but like, he was good at articulating a vision for America. What the fuck happened, Democrats? Like, Biden was Obama's running mate. What do you like? And now you don't have a vision. Now you don't have a vision for a multiracial democracy. You know, we can add, as you know, leftists, a multiracial working class democracy. You can't articulate that fucking vision. What's wrong with, like, it makes me so mad. So, but all to say that, like, you can't just motivate, and I think you speak to this, motivate movements based on being against something, but also what are we working towards? And if that is a free America, you know, democracy for all movement, you know, so be it, but say it, articulate it.
Yes, it's not enough to merely be in opposition. You have to also be in proposition. And that is because in any instance, you know, we have a two-party duopoly, as everybody knows. But But in every election, there are always three people running, which is our people, their people, and stay at home. And stay at home has the literal home team advantage because that's where people already are. So we have to remember that that's quote unquote the third candidate, even when there isn't a formal third candidate. And if we are not giving people something to vote for in the electoral context, then we are going to screw ourselves over. But in this context, right now, the position in which we find ourselves, in which I think we actually have to actively push against a default toward thinking that we're going to vote our way out of autocracy, because we are not. We are not. We have not. We cannot. We will not. You cannot vote your way out of a completely and totally corrupted Supreme Court, or, you cannot vote your way out of a completely and totally corrupted political system in which, let's just be honest, the reason why many Democrats, hashtag not all Democrats, but many Democrats are not stepping up to this plate is because presently they're only hearing from their customers. And by their customers, I mean their voters. And they're not hearing from their bosses. And by their bosses, I mean their donors. And until they hear from the people to whom they actually respond, until those folks, Jamie Dimon, or the person who runs Bank of America, or the person who runs, Cisco or whatever corporation, until they're like, hey, yo, we'd love a financial system that was actually functional. Hey, yo, we'd love to be able to actually have roads that we can travel down to, transit our products. And we kind of need a functional government in order to be able to do business. Also, the markets are tanking. When that flip switches, I think you're going to see Democrats and, some of these Republicans alike starting to step up and make more noise.
That's a very interesting observation. I think that's really true. Okay. I do want to ask you two more questions, and that's it. That's it. But there's always this testing around the economy and messing. It was the economy. Sure. Why is that actually not a useful framework for thinking about where the American people are at?
Yeah. So obviously, being able to put food on the table and be home in time to eat it is pretty important to most people. We've monetized human existence in many countries, certainly in this one. And so economic concerns are top of mind for people. That's why, my joke is like, stop asking on polls about that. Like, I promise you that's people's top issue. Like, people like back rubs. Like, why are you asking? I promise.
Right.
That's like, you don't need to keep asking. That's their top issue. They need to eat something. They need to live somewhere. Duh. However, when we frame economic concerns, which people rightly and legitimately have, as this is good for the economy, this is bad for the economy, this will grow the economy, this will shrink the economy is on life support, we need to resuscitate the patient, we need a healthy economy, we have a recovery bill. When we live inside of a metaphor in which we unwittingly liken the economy to a body, a sentient being, we actually, I know through experimentation, I wrote a whole book about metaphors for the economy and how bad this all is. We pave the way for laissez-faire thinking. The notion that the economy is an entity that, yes, in dire cases of emergency needs to be resuscitated, but as far as the business of daily living, government is just this meddlesome external entity getting in the way of the optimal functioning of the economy. And so if we are in an argument in which Republicans say, we love the economy best, the way you make sweet love to the economy is by, giving Elon blowjobs and giving more money to billionaires, then we say, no, we love the economy best. The way you grow the economy is by paying workers another 2 cents and only beating them on Thursdays, or whatever proposition that we are having. I know I'm not being very positive. Sorry, getting a little real talk from me. Then we are trapped in their conversation. And what we know, because we live it, is that you can have periods of extraordinary economic growth. GDP growth can be off the charts, and that actually means nothing in terms of inequality. And in fact, it tends to correspond to exacerbating inequality.
Yep.
The economy being better doesn't mean that you, person living in, Fresno, California, or Poughkeepsie, or, Peoria, or wherever, is actually feeling better or even materially doing better. And so what we need to be talking about is people's economic experiences. And in fact, when we ask in surveys who is better for the economy, the majority of voters credit Republicans. It's false, it's not true, but that's what they do. When we ask who is better for your economic well-being, the majority credit Democrats. And yet we keep agreeing to have their conversation.
Totally. And there is this like, I mean, God, and speaking of the economy, I mean, the third way now is like, well, we need to really be talking about like Americans' desire to be that millionaire and billionaire and like, their love of money and, why. And it's just like, so you want it to play into the same, false narrative that people are just just a stone's throw away from becoming a billionaire as well. I mean, it's like people are aspirational for wanting to talk about the economy the way an Elon Musk does, or like focusing on only the stock market as a measurement of their good, of their well-being. But the reality is completely different, as you're talking about. And it's, and other things can be economic, right? Other things. And in terms of, I was talking about this with like safety. It's like, only framing safety in terms of the police is wrongheaded, and we need to stop buying into that, when safety could mean universal education. It could mean jobs programs. It can mean, I was talking about this in LA, it could mean street lighting is obviously safety. If you don't have money for street lighting because it's all gone to the cops, then how do you feel safe walking home generally, right? Like it's so basic, and the Democrats sadly buy into, again, a very right-wing framing on it.
Yeah, and like classic example. So in 2020 and in 2022, in stark relief, we saw what my colleague Mike Podhorser termed a red wave in a blue undertow. There was this predicted red wave. We were going to get trounced. The incumbent party always takes a shellacking in the midterms, etc. Historical precedent. But in point of fact, we were able to stave off much of that. But if you actually look under the hood at what happened in different states, what you will find is that in 15 states, purple states that are either sort of the classic battlegrounds, plus some others that aren't like super, super blue or super red, we fought campaigns that made freedom central, that essentially said to people, hey, this election is about turning out for your freedoms, right? Josh Shapiro, protect our freedoms. That was his central campaign premise. Before Fetterman went off and became whatever the hell he is right now, he also was, this is about freedom. This is about common sense. This is about these people want to take over and let the billionaires steal from you, not buying in. And then and in those 15 states, we had historic turnout among the base. We had levels of Democratic turnout that rivaled what happened in 2018, which was historic, but all the more so, and in 2020. So in 2020, we were not in the incumbency, right? And so to recreate that in a midterm is unprecedented. Right. In the other 35 states, including the purportedly super blue California and super blue New York, Democratic participation was down as predicted, and we did get a red wave in those states. That's why we lost the House. And those were the places where New York in particular, for example, they forgot the plot, which is that if you want to win the debate, you have to set the terms. And so they were having this stupid ass conversation that goes, crime is up. No, crime is down. No, the way to deal with crime is this. No, the way to deal with crime is that. Crime, 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 crime. Have I made you think about crime? I need you to think about crime. In Wisconsin and Minnesota, both in 2020 and 22 states that I know well because I worked closely in those races, what we said is permutations on, we know what keeps us safe. It's living in communities where we know our neighbors and we look out for each other. We know what keeps us safe. It's ensuring the people who are sworn to serve and protect us act in our interest and treat us as equals. We know what keeps us safe. It's having programs for our kids to wander off to. It's having things that our neighbors can turn to in good times and in bad. But today, a handful of Republicans want to turn us against each other. They think that if they can make us fear each other, we will let them get away with stealing all our communities need. Another way of encapsulating that, the way that we did in particular in those states, was fund our lives. So there are ways to make these
fund our lives. I like that. Yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah, I mean, we got to wrap. But I also, everyone, please just check out Anat's everything you can get your hands on, but especially her podcast. Can you tell me about Words to Win By?
Yeah, so Words to Win By is a narrative podcast. So every episode is about a campaign that we won somewhere in the world. You get to hear the polling that we did, the ads that we made, the strategy we deployed. Sometimes there are fights backstage, like we think it should be this message. No, it should be that message. And there's not a lot of dramatic tension because there's a couple episodes that break the form, but for the most part, the spoiler alert is that we win in the end, because
this is what we need. This is the podcast we need.
Yeah. So it is about showing, not telling, that progressive ideals actually are very popular, and that when you campaign on your values, not running from your values, that is the way that you win in really hard places and really hard spaces, in entrenched issues against right-wing authoritarians and all of it. It's not because all we're doing is talking about, winning a Democratic race in Oakland, California. We're in the belly of the beast and we're winning.
I love it. Anat Shenker-Osorio, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. And please come back. And I will be listening to this episode and other episodes over and over and over again. I've never heard the case for progressive messaging spelled out so clearly from Anat, and I hope I got to some of what, I hope I made it clear for y'all. I think we're in a time right now where we're being told that we should, by some folks, centrists and shitty leftists, and shitty progressives, that, we have to meet Americans where they're at right now. And if Americans are scared of trans people, or they're scared of ideas like defund the police, well, then we should run away from those and we shouldn't talk about them at all. Never mind, or Palestine, for they're scared of Palestine, so don't talk about it. And yet the social movements that have gotten politicized 17-year-olds, politicized 80-year-olds in my mother's case, have brought people out of their comfort zone, have gotten them to say and think about things in a new way. It's like, why would you run from the very things that are captivating people, right? And what if it is anti-trans hate, but captivate them with love, captivate them with humanity. With as we talk about with Laverne Cox, right? Humanizing trans people, making it fun, making it representational, all of those things. And so it is just wild to me that you can't be on the left or a progressive if you don't actually have an idea of where you want to take this country to a better place, bending towards the bending on that arc towards justice and freedom. Get out of the movement. Get out of the, you're not, get out. What are you doing? What do you stand for? Do you know what I'm saying? And I say that, man, and that's all shades of blue. That's all shades of, even Hakeem Jeffries. Get out the way, man. You don't believe in anything. So, say what you will about someone like Elizabeth Warren, at least kind capitalism is a vision. I might not like that as an anti-capitalist, but I'm given what we're seeing now, that's pretty good. Pretty good. Kind capitalism. Hey, why not? Why not? So I love these discussions. Please find Anat. Just listen to Words to Win By, and also find her on all of the podcasts that she's done and all of the places that she's lent her incredible wealth of knowledge to, because you will learn something and it will really help us as we push forward and think about where we're going in this country and where this struggle is taking us. I'm just nerding out, so I'm gonna read some of your comments and then we'll go away. Speaking of people who aren't doing this, TYT is partnering with Dr. Phil tonight to cover the State of the Union, and of course, Jake felt it necessary to act like a man baby while insulting people who don't support this idea. Thank you, Drea, for bringing us that horrible nugget of news, and also reminding us that I will be streaming the State of the Union because I am the masochist, but I will be joined by Wajahat Ali. And of course, Mehdi Hassan's going to make an appearance. So everybody check out America Unhinged tonight on Zatea's YouTube. If you're in the future, you can also go back and watch. And I just wanted to shout out Hypno Amber, who said, as a former neuroscientist, she is nailing it, which is great to understand. Like, yes, people respond to positive messaging. People respond to vision. And if you keep on saying the thing that like you allegedly are against, then they're going to associate you with that. Like Inflation Reduction Act, they're going to associate you with inflation. It's very simple. And Aaron Okianos, thank you for this comment. Same with pro-life, which is actually anti-choice. Exactly. And people like Liz Winstead and everyone at Abortion AF really, we're driving home the idea that it's not pro-life. It is anti-choice. Antis. They call them antis. Anti-choice. They're antis. And that should always be the framing. Don't ever give them the pro-life framing. That is so old and it's on their terms. Alex says Trump is tanking the economy on purpose. Probably. Anat does listen to people. Clementine. And thank you, Chris Wright says, what are we looking for from Dems during tonight's Orange Palpatine speech? Well, there's going to be I can't remember her name. There's going to be a rebuttal. So we'll be paying attention to that. A little bit. I mean, I'm curious. The fact that I don't know who it is good because it means there's new blood and there are new people who are being tapped who are not already in the limelight. It's not going to be Chris Murphy begging for money. It's not going to be Nancy Pelosi. Don't shadow ban me on YouTube says, thanks for the gifted membership, Chris, who gave 10 memberships. Also, I'll be seeing you in Sacramento, March 16th. Fran, let's go. Let's go. Thank you so much, Chris. You're the best. I'm going to wait for the fart song. Okay, Donald James says a lot of people from Sacramento here going to the show. I know I'll be there. Donald James going to be there? Okay, that's amazing. I love this. Marcos Granger is congratulating me on an Argentine goal from Julian Alvarez. I got to go watch that immediately. Fight for the Cause says THC and daylight savings are both good. And Rachel Atwood, hello, headed my third demonstration today now. I love you, Rachel. Why are you the best? You're awesome. I hope it's good and I hope it's invigorating. Everyone, be invigorated by your local community and folks who are coming out. Meet friends. Get out there. And Zia Spot said, thank you for your super chat. 100% Hakeem got to go and be replaced by someone who has a spine. Yeah. And Rage Rock for now. MAGA, massive American gaslighting alert. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Oddly Magical Brandy telling us there's a proposal for a 2028 ballot measure to approve creating commission that would investigate the legal path for CA to secede. So bold. Yes. Thank you for telling me that. 2028 is too. Wait. Ain't nobody got time for 2028? Ain't nobody got time for 2028? Are you kidding me? Benjamin Morrill going to join Tony's. What are you bitching about? Senator Chris Murphy sent me that same text with the same donate link. Also, state food stores are needed. Yes, we love Zoran and we love that idea. There should be no reason we don't have that. Let's see. Hypno Amber, also with everything on fire, plus the genocide that they want here of trans people and war on disabled peeps. Ugh. Agreed. Guys, let's just get into the fart song and we'll ride it out. What a show. What a show. Thank you, everybody. All good. So much to Marty Bras. I love your name. Thanks for becoming a patron at $10 more and getting this shout out. Thank you to Sarah Shaw 97. Thank you to Angie Giggs. You're awesome. Thank you to our new Substackers, Rowan Sean and Nick Balderson. I see you. And over here. Hang on. Thank you to new members. Obviously, Benjamin Morrill, Chris Wright. Hang on, I'm trying to get over to Twitch. Give me a second. Give me a God. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. I can't. Thank you to Eric77 the Red. Thank you to Looney Tunes 9000. Thank you to G.A. Thrawn. Thanks to Eeyore Fedora. All subscribed with Prime. AJ Nestor, thank you so much. 11 months strong. Franny, you become one of the best out there. I know you. Thanks, Leftist Red Panda, for subscribing as well. Appreciate y'all. And thank you to Paige Omek, to our new editor, Brent Godin, who is truly crushing it. Shout out to Brent. You're awesome. And thank you, as always, to Andy Vasoyan. We're streaming Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Follow us on all the things, Bituation Room, Bituation Pod. We're on Substack at frannyfio.substack.com. And until tomorrow's, fight the power, fuck the patriarchy, free Palestine, and don't just bitch about it, be about it. Bye-bye.